All right, so a little update on the 97. So the other night I got the fuel tank in, got the fuel pump in. The fuel lines were different between the 97 that he went and looked at and the tank he had, and I'm not sure enough about these trucks to know what year the change was and whatnot, but the fuel basket that was in this truck was this one right here, this the white plastic that had the clip-on style quick connect fittings. And the strange thing about this was, if you look at the distance, once the hose, once the hose is clipped on, there's not enough space to get the tool in there to unclip it. So I had to do it one at a time with a pick and got them off. But so this assembly ended up not working with the fuel tank that he brought me. So then he went back to the guy's yard or whatever, and so this connector was different. It was all different, and the one that he looked at was also a 97 as well. So he brought me the tank with the sending unit for that tank and the fuel line. So I just cut the clamp part off and then took the hose off, and it's just a barb underneath this fitting. And then I put fuel rated hose with the correct EFI fuel clamps, and then put those on his fuel lines, and then put a higher flow rate pump in it and got that situated. So these were the lines that he brought me. So these actually didn't have a barb, but you can see where the clamp went around it. So, but these were off an extended cab, so these were too long, and I just needed the hose in to fit the lines. So this is a style it had where it was threaded. So anyway, a lot more than we were expecting to deal with, but that's part of this. So got all that done, had to home out the both sending units, figure out which wires went to where. Got all that done, and then put a battery in it, got the radiator intake, got it finished put together, and I wanted to check my wiring and all before I got too much farther with this thing. And so this ECU is the Unicorn ECU. This is a drive-by cable P59. They came in V6 trucks and vans, and I'm not sure what else they came in, but once they went to the P59, there's a computer piece, or I don't know what you call it. I'm not a computer guy, but the infrastructure is in the drive-by cable ECU. So your red and blue ECU, and then once they went to the P59, which was drive-by wire, they took that off the motherboard, and you didn't have a way to control the IAC motor separately. So you had to find one of these, and it is one part number only for this ECU. If it matches that part number, then you have one. I was at my buddy's house, and he had a V6 truck. Then I was looking at it, and I was like, this thing's drive-by cable, and then it's a blue-green ECU. So I bought it from him, and was saving it for a project, and this happens to be the one that ended up on, because everything's already set up for drive-by cable. I don't like drive-by wire, but that's just me. It's personal preference. But when I got it all in and got it together and everything, obviously it was for a V6. So I had to change the operating system on it and do a segment swap. So what you do is you go on once you read the file, you get the operating system number, you write that down. Then you go to the tune repository on HP Tuners, and then you search. What I do is I search the exact same year. So I put in 2005 because this was a 05 ECU. And then for make and model, I just put all. And then engine, I selected 6.0, and then transmission, automatic. And then I typed the OS number in the box below, and then search. And it actually came up with a couple hits, and they were actually four-wheel drive trucks. The ones I saw, I was expecting to see a van, because typically, a 25 or 3500 van would have a drive-by cable and a 4L80. But I guess the van's got 4.8s and 4L80s, so they got weird combos. So I found that, and then you open your file, and then you do file compare, and then you come down to segment swapper, and it gives you how many options. So you have engine diagnostic, transmission diagnostic, and then P59 system, and then there was P59 fuel, and then speedometer for some reason. So when I initially did it, I only did the first four, which was engine and trans and the associated diagnostic part, and went through and made my changes to the file, bumped the airflow up for the camshaft, looked at the timing, did the normal stuff I do to the tune file, tried to crank it up, and the fuel pump turned on, and it cranked over, and I knew it wasn't going to crank up, so I stopped trying. Had my son come out here and checked the wiring to make sure that the pink wires that go to the harness are hot in run and start, because if you wire it up to where it's only hot in run, when you go to start, then you won't be powering your coils or injectors. So that's a big thing. You got to make sure that you have power to the coils and the injectors during run and start positions. So when I looked at the fuse box cover for this, the fuse box that I used, the OEM fuse box, it was for ignition and ECU. So I was like, well, I know that that's going to be powered in both positions, so I knew that wasn't it. I put a spark plug coincidentally in number one wire and had my son turn it over, and it was sparked. So I was like, okay, well, I got spark, it should crank up. But then something told me to check, further down. So I checked every other one, and none of the other ones were firing but that one for some reason. So I read the codes on it, and it had a P0315, I believe it was, which is could not learn crank position. And on the Gen 3 ECUs, I have never, ever, ever done a crank relearn or anything like that. That's for your newer stuff that has VVT and stuff like that. And I had a guy tell me one time that his truck didn't run right because I didn't do a crank relearn on it. I've never done a crank relearn on a Gen 3, and then come to find out, the problem he was having was one of the codes he had, and I told him what to do to fix it, but it was my fault, though. And what that problem was the TPS on these junk throttle bodies. You have to file the crap out of the holes to elongate them enough to rotate it around to get the reading correct on the throttle position sensor. And that was a problem he was having, and I told him how to fix it, but it was my fault. So anyway, that's one problem with drive-by cable on these junk cheap throttle bodies that I like to run because they're cheap. So and I've already ported this one so it doesn't whistle. Where was I? Okay, so then it wasn't firing, and then So I looked up the code and found that, LS swap PO315, what's the common problem issues, and it says wiring, which is, very likely I did do the wiring. So there could be a problem with that. It could be a problem with the sensor. It could be a problem with the ECU, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, well, this motor ran in the other truck, so I doubt it's the sensor. The wiring, yes, probably. So I checked all that, back to the ECU, everything was pinned properly, and then I was like, okay, I just feel like it's the ECU. So I was able to find a thread, I believe it was on the HP Tuners forum, and the gentleman was having the same issue I was having and actually responded back that he solved the problem and how he solved the problem. So that was absolutely amazing that somebody reported back and followed up with the solution to the problem that they'd initially posted about. So he said that he had a V6 ECU, and but his it sounded like it would actually run, but it was skipping because it was only running on 6 cylinders because it was a V6 ECU parameters. So what he said ultimately solved the issue is he wrote, when he did the segment swap, he went back to the original file, redid the segment swap, and then he used the P59 system. He copied that over. So when I did that, I noticed changes in the system operation. So if you look in the GMT 800, that's where you turn off the brake torque management, and you have a 0 or a 1, which means on or off. So when I did that, the electric throttle control had a 1, which I did not need. I needed it to be 0 so it'll run by drive-by cable. So when you change those parameters, in order for them to take effect, you have to do a right entire. So I did that. I hooked up my bench harness. I made a little bench harness years ago, and it has the appropriate constant power key, and then I have the keyed power wired through the like a little keyed switch, and then I got my OBD2 plug, and then my power and ground. So I hooked that up. I always like to write Gen 3 stuff with my bench harness, just because I'm fearful, because from the OBD2 it doesn't always work, and that only started happening to me, I believe, in 03 and newer. Somehow I think maybe that's when CAN bus started or something, but sometimes it was problematic to read the file. I had a 03 2500 HD, and it would not communicate through the OBD2 in the truck, so I always had to carry this around with me, run it and drive it, and then bench flash it when I made an adjustment. It would run on the scanner for the data log, but it would not write a file to the ECU. It would erase it, and then it wouldn't crank up. So I always had to have my bench harness with me. So when I did the right entire, including, I just went ahead and took everything from the compare file and swapped it into this ECU, and then went through and did a couple of the parameters just to get it close enough to see if that would run. I didn't want to waste my time going through and changing every parameter and then it not work. So once I did that, did a right entire, went in, and it fired right up. So crisis averted, and my wiring was correct. So I mean, it should be. I've done enough of them that I should know how to wire one at this point. But anyway, so now I went back through the tune and changed all the parameters to how I wanted them to initially get the truck running, and then I'll tidy up, finish everything off now that I know it works. So this is some little radiator with 2 little fans. Hopefully they'll be enough to keep it cool. I don't know, but I do got to wire those up. I've got to put a pan gasket on the transmission pan, and fresh fluid, and I'm gonna do a fluid and filter change on the transmission. So had this one rebuilt and it leaked ever since I got it back. Go figure. And so we're gonna fix that, and then I'll do the exhaust on it, and just try to get this thing finished out so I can get it back to him. And I gotta lower it still, and you know, there's plenty left to do on it. We're not there yet, but we're on the home stretch. So getting them to run in the vehicle is always a major victory to me, because it just means you're getting close. So, but that was a new one to me with the. Well, I guess, you know, because I've never done one with a V6 ECU before, so that was a learning experience for me. So if you're having that issue, hopefully that helped you out. But you probably already knew how to do it anyway. So yeah, so I'm going to finish up. I do have to. These are the leftover wires from the body connector. So I know one of them's the coolant temp. I've got to run that into the cylinder head, and then I got to find out which one's tachometer, so I can wire that from the ECU to the truck, and then I have a tach. The VSS for this truck, it has 2 VSS, and the instructions from lt1swap.com or whatever it is said to tie both VSS together from the truck to the single output of the ECU, and that should work. And then fuel gauge should work, and then voltmeter, that should work too, as long as it is getting power, which it is. And I used, the good thing is I was able to use the existing truck's positive and negative cables, and hook up all my grounds and everything. And yeah, so it's coming together. The wiring, you know, it takes some time. You gotta go wire by wire, and you know, that's just how it is sometimes. So anyway, we got it running. Now I'll finish it up, and then hopefully have a video of this thing running pretty soon.